Today I'm answering a cry of help from the audio community. What can you do when you have small speakers? Should you upgrade to bigger ones? Should you get a pair of subwoofers or start running down to your local neighborhood friendly audio pornographer? No, no need for that. If you have small speakers, they are a little bit limited in generating bass, because for bass literally means that you have long sound waves. So those frequencies that we need to create to sustain the low frequencies, they require very long wavelength, and that requires a big device. However, even when you have a bigger speaker, that's not so easy, because believe it or not, these giant speakers there, which are 300 liters volume, the size of them really qualifies them only to produce perfect bass down to about 160 hertz. So below 160 hertz, they still need help. And if you have tiny bookshelf speakers, their size qualifies them to produce bass down to about 600 hertz, and below that they need help. And do you want to slap on a pair of subwoofers or go for bigger speakers? Really, there's no need for that. And now I will give you the help. So here's the helping hand. So imagine this is your room. Then the number one issue how you can improve the bass, in case you have your speakers on along the longer wall, somewhere around here, and then here's your couch, then you will have an issue with bass, and you will find that your small bookshelf speakers will not give you sufficient bass. However, here's the other thing. Even if you upgrade to bigger speakers, you will still have some issues in your room when you have this setup. So just flip things around and put the speakers here and your sofa here. So now they radiate sound this way. And when we have this type of situation, then the speakers, as they work, they basically create sound waves which are lunging forward and backward. So this is how the sound waves will move as created by the speakers. When you have them along the long wall, then the sound waves will move like this. And you see, when they move this way, then the bass that they have to cover is narrower. So the energy is concentrated to a smaller space. And that's why they can sustain those low frequencies much better. Because the speaker itself, when you see the front of the speaker, the face here, the width of the face, defines the lowest frequency that it can support. If you want that speaker to make frequencies lower than that, then you need the help of the room. And that's why, if you want great bass, your first thing to look for is not a subwoofer, but a perfect room, a room with perfect room acoustics. Of course, we don't have that, and we have to live with family members often, and that's why we have a situation that we have to solve, and you use your room to work with. And in either cases, let's just go for a clean page. Let's see. So we have our room, and let's try to set up our speakers this way along the narrow wall and firing towards there. And you can put your sofa in here, and eventually the closer you put your sofa to the back wall, the more bass you will have. So if you have a situation like this, your speakers are pulled out here, and you have your equipment rack in between, and here's your turntable or a streamer and amp sitting. This is the situation that most audiophiles have if they have like a perfect setup. And however, even in such a perfect setup, when you have your bookshelf speakers here on their stands, you will find that you don't have enough bass, and this is where this Cry for Help video kicks in. One of the things to improve the low end response is move your chair, sofa, whatever closer to the wall. The closer you go, the stronger the bass gets. However, it can also smear the imaging, and especially it can create problems in the high frequencies, because from the wall you get these wall reflections when the sound is reflecting back from the wall, and because of that reflection, that's why the bass gets stronger. But you will also have high frequencies reflecting, which create a problem with the imaging, and that's why people want to pull out their listening position from the wall. You can help with that if you put on the wall, you put a rug on the wall, or you have a bookcase behind you. Like for example, let me just show you my situation. So this is where my listening position is. I have record racks around the listening position. So this is like a perfect solution to break up those reflected high frequencies. And you can do something like that. If you do not have records, put CDs there, or put your bookcase there, put your wine case there. But just if you put a wine case there, then do not use glass to cover those wine cases, because that glass will give you terrible reflections. So anyway, get your artistic streak out, maybe like put like a potted plant there, a bush or something, and just place things that you would put in your room there to break up the high frequency reflections, and then you will be able to enjoy maybe even an octave lower or deep bass compared to pulling out your sofa here, or even right 1/3 of the room. So that's what a lot of audiophiles want. Your chair pulled out 1/3 of the room, your speakers pulled out 1/3 of the room, and then you get perfect imaging. If you move your chair back than that and your speakers closer to the wall, then your imaging will suffer. You can avoid those suffering if you add things along your walls to break up the hard reflections, and then you don't have to worry that you are not perfect 1/3 at these positions. And also, if you are in this situation 1/3 1/3, then that's where the bass sucks the most. Then you have very little bass reinforcement, so you will be able to enjoy mid-range and high frequencies, but not the bass. If you want bass, you have to move your speakers closer backwards, and not just closer to the back wall, but closer to the rear wall as well. And one more thing, if you are really worried about imaging, do not keep your equipment rack in between the two speakers. That really messes up imaging. Even if you leave them out 1/3 of the room, I mean the speakers, move the equipment rack back, so that the space that's occupied between the speakers, that there's a real space there, and you do not clutter it up with a big rack and big stuff. So you see here what I have. These are not small speakers, but still I follow the same thing, that between the two speakers I do not have heavy equipment racks, nothing, but my equipment rack is behind, it's recessed behind the speakers. So if you would see, like, my speakers are like this big, and the rack is behind them, but not in between. If you put anything in between, that really does a number on the imaging. So why do you want to put the rack behind? There's another reason. It does not only helps with imaging by freeing up the space between your speakers, but it adds a little bit of rear loading for your speakers. Let me get another color. So when your speakers are trying to make sound waves, these sound waves, if they are coming from the tweeter, they are these tiny waves, and they have the support of your front baffle to spread out. But as you go, as the sound wave frequencies become so long that they reach around, and then your speaker becomes an omnidirectional sound source. So the waves start to propagate like a bubble, like a globe expanding. And then when you have that situation, then when you have this shelf and your rack and a big object that presents an aerodynamic obstacle to the sound waves, then that expanding bubble will stop here and it will reflect back from there. And it will help to eat up the airspace behind your speakers and create a narrowing for the sound, so that the sound waves cannot expand towards here, but they are forced to expand towards you. And that's how every concert hall works, is that when we have let me just show you how a concert hall is done. You have a stage, right? And the stages are not usually perfectly rectangular. They might be curved in a little bit if it's a good stage. Yeah, right, it's curved in. And when you have the audience, then it opens up, and then you have like the seats, the rows of seats coming up here, and your concert hall opens and widens out, and it's the widest at the back, right? And here we have like a narrow area where the symphonic orchestra or your rock band is, and it has the support, so that the sound waves, as they are expanding, they get reflected from here, and the sound is funneled out to expand onto the stage. And that's why you have great bass in real venues and in theaters, and you want to achieve the same thing in your living room. So by occupying the space with your rack behind the speakers, that acts as a narrowing in the propagation, because if you have the rack here and nothing in between, then the sound will expand here and expand there as well, and that part which is free to go back is lost to you, and as it reflects back from the back wall, it's going to cancel out the bass and you are going to lose a lot. And you can expand on this situation even more, and I will show you how. You remember this video that I posted when I had these speakers with me? This video is, as the title, Low and High Efficiency Systems Direct Comparison. And here, when I had this setup right here, now the bookshelves are not there, but when they were there, they had really impressive bass, like really impressive bass, even though this is the long wall of my room. So let me see. So that's the long wall of the room, but despite of that, these small bookshelf speakers were cranking out really well-rounded bass. And I'm not talking just about frequency extension, because that's really something that's that more or less correlates to what we experience, but really how bass is perceived is that if you have good bass, you hear that it's like the sound is big. It makes the speakers sound big, because the essential difference between smaller speakers and bigger speakers is that bigger speakers make it sound as you are listening to a live event, while smaller speakers make it sound that it's just scaled down. Your singer, which is like a singer height with the big speaker, becomes this tiny image when you check it out on the bookshelves. And when I had them set up like this, they threw an amazingly big picture, and that's a very peculiar phenomena. And this is, if you have been listening to this video, this is the key point. So congratulations for those listeners who can only listen to for 5 minutes. it's their loss, but you made it to the 15-minute barrier and you are rewarded. And this information you get now will be gold for you. Is that when you notice that when you go to an audio showroom, then the setups look like that. So you have a myriad speakers in the store, and your speakers that you are auditioning are set up, and next to them there's some much bigger speakers that the store is just talking there, and you hear that the sound is really big, and then you take them home and then the big sound disappears. And the reason for that is because the small speakers need those big objects there to act as focusing barriers for the bass. Because what's happening is that let's draw it again. So we have those small speakers, and in this case I also have these huge big speakers next to them, and behind them here I have an equipment rack, and that's how you would hear in most showrooms as well when they demonstrate small speakers. So essentially what's happening here, look at that, these big objects are taking up the space and essentially cutting out a lot of air from the room and creating a stage. So this is mimicking, where did I write it or draw it here, this concert hall situation when the sound is coming from a smaller space and expanding to a bigger space. This is what your audio dealer does when he has those big speakers next to the small speakers and the equipment racks behind, that he's creating this funneling effect, and that adds to the bass response in a shocking manner. It's like almost like you have the feel that you have +1 octave deep and response. It's as if you have added a subwoofer without going to need to buy a subwoofer and have issues with placement and so on. So if you do not have extra pairs of speakers, then my advice is place something like a record rack next to your speaker. It can be a bookshelf or CD rack, anything. So if you look at this situation, maybe showing it here will explain, you do not need to have them bigger than the speakers. It really helps if they are bigger, but if you have something that reaches maybe to the half of the speaker or even to the base of the speaker, somewhere here, like this tall, like a rack or a bookshelf this tall, and place it right next to the speaker. You do not have to space it out more than that. If you place it right next to them, there, place another one there, and then it's as if you change your bookshelves to floor standing speakers. You add that much helping to that. And I want to tell you guys something really peculiar, that with my buddy Erwin, we have listened to these exact same speakers, and we were A/B testing them with a pair of Aurum Cantus speakers, which are floor standers, and they are about this big, and they were next to the Ryans, and we were A/B testing them, and shockingly the Ryans had deeper and more gutsier and bigger bass response than the Aurum Cantus. And we were just, wow, that's amazing. But then what happened is that when I took out the Aurum Cantus from the Ryans, and they had to play by themselves in the room without that big speaker next to them, the lower end disappeared. It was gone. So when I took them out and just put the Aurum Cantus instead, the Aurum Cantus had much better bass. But if I left the Aurum Cantus here, put the Ryans in there, the Ryans bass beat the Aurum Cantus's bass. So that's how important to support your speakers. So as many have said before me, and I have said before in countless videos, that the most important part of bass reproduction is your room. And I hope this little trick to put something next to your speakers to reinforce the bass, it goes the longest way to producing a happy life and happy speaker positioning. I hope this helped a lot of us, a lot of you out there. And if you have bookshelf speakers, please try this out, put something there, and whatever you put there, it needs to be something solid. So if you put like a potted plant there, that will do the exact same, that will absorb the sound. You will need something hard and concrete, something that is not glass. If it has glass surface, it will create hard reflections which will do a nasty sound. So put there something like a bookshelf, record rack, CD rack, and let me know what you experience. Thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.